Hi everyone, I'm Jim Tolles, a spiritual teacher. Today I want to talk about the ego grind and what that is on our path to spiritual freedom. Down below I have some more resources for you. If you enjoy this video and other things on my channel, feel free to subscribe to it. And if you haven't found my blog yet, feel free to check out spiritualawakeningprocess.com. The ego grind is what happens as we come to awareness and the ego triggers our emotions and our thoughts and our physical sensations in an uncomfortable way. It's like going into work. One of your coworkers says to you, hey, there's this big meeting going on today. And your ego gets triggered. And it decides that this is a bad meeting. It decides there's going to be layoffs. And it starts to cause fear. It starts to cause changes in your muscles and your heart rate and your breath rate, right? But the difference in this scenario is right now you've been doing inner work. You know about coming back to awareness. So you're coming back to awareness. And guess what? The ego doesn't immediately stop with this issue. Now, for some issues, we get pretty good at this, right? That you come back to awareness and they just drop. And over time, this happens with more and more things. But it doesn't matter where you are in the spiritual path, that the issues you're most attached to at that time, not what they were necessarily before or will be after, but at that time, they have a lot of momentum. They got a lot of energy built into them. And so your nervous system and your brain and everything is built to keep remembering to worry when somebody says something about work in a large company meeting. This is the grind. It's like, do we stay with this practice of coming back to awareness, even as our ego keeps yelling, this is going to be bad, it's going to be bad. Right? And we can even say in this particular situation, you go in and there is no layoffs. It's just a quarterly update. And so then, the ego says, oh, there's no threat, and it goes back into hiding. And a lot of people misunderstand certain levels of peacefulness that they reside in as being free of the ego, when what they don't realize is their life is just really, really good. This is actually a really big problem, I think, with a lot of Westerners. And while there's plenty of poverty, serious issues in this country, so if you are one of the 40 million people in the U.S. who's in poverty right now, I fully understand how you feel triggered about food and money and all sorts of insecurities. That's legitimately concerning, although coming back to awareness there is useful too, and we're going to talk more about why that is. Now, for so many others, you're not in any immediate danger for the most basic things, right? And the ego is just creating constant problems when there are actually no real problems that are existing. So for some of you who've done work and you've come back more and more to reality, you start to see this reality and you're more at peace. But there are other levels of ego that are still there that can be triggered with scarcity. And so kind of pivoting back to, if you are one of the people who is in legitimate poverty, those ego fears still don't help you. Like, we can understand it. And actually this can be very liberating to be able to come back to awareness, so that when a legitimate problem, like not having enough to feed your family, doesn't waste more of your own emotional and physical resources and worry. That doesn't help. So it's an interesting way where we really discover that the ego is inefficient. It's just wasting resources. It's like, I already know I need to get food for the family. I don't need my ego getting in the way. So this is powerful on that level too. And it in no way is about magically fixing anything or manifesting anything. Life is life. And people legitimately have hardships. And that's why it's important for all of us to help one another, because things aren't fair in life. Helping each other is really, really important. And the way we can help ourselves, as I said, is coming back to awareness, coming back and watching this ego grind. That it sits there and it keeps believing the things that we've taught it to believe, and that society and upbringing all taught us to believe. And how long can we keep coming back? Or how much do we keep feeding it again? Because if we feed it again with more worry, we give it more power again. If we give it more power, it will keep going. And this creates this thing that I mentioned in a past video, this kind of funky feeling of being split. Because you're watching this one part of yourself that you don't fully have control over. And you don't. But you also don't fully feel identified with it as completely as you once do. When you feel completely identified with something, You just worry and you think this is correct and that you're scared and so forth, rather than the fear is chosen. This is a made-up identity. And you're watching it. It's like, oh, look at it. It's upset again as it spins round and around through usually the same types of fears and thoughts again and again. Many of you have already noticed that the ego is not particularly unique. It's very repetitive. It's not very inspired. And this is where discipline comes in. As I've mentioned, this is where the dedication to staying as awareness builds a certain resilience, and it's a resilience to yourself, a resilience to your upset emotions inside. Very often we think of being resilient to external things, but really it's about us and how we're responding. We're trying to be resilient to our own fears and our own angers and our own depressions and things that come up to us, our own sense of desire that can drive us. How can we just endure those things and watch them and let them subside on their own? Because they will. Without continued energy, continued effort, those unconsciously chosen responses will begin to fall apart. They begin to degrade. Notice the word degrade. Degrade is not immediately vanish. Degrade is this sort of erosion, breaking down on its own time frame. When I talk to my students, this comes up very regularly. They'll say, oh man, this thing is happening. And I know this is not a thing, whatever it is. And I'll say, yeah, you're in the grind. Keep coming back to awareness. Sometimes there are different spiritual tools that are useful depending on what's going on. But we don't want to try and get too complicated. That usually leads us to trying to medicate the grind. To try and make it feel less bad, but not really let it fully drop. It's just some way to kind of counteract it, rather than just letting the energy expend itself. In the same way that I often use the metaphor of a spinning fan. That the ego has been spinning for a long time, and we switch off the power to it, and we start to watch the fan, it keeps going. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm doing something wrong right now. It's like, no, it just has a lot of energy in it. It's going to take a while. Don't plug it back in or don't switch the fan back on. Let it keep going. But unfortunately, and this is part of the issue that a lot of us have, is we switch it back on. We say, I should be worried about this quarterly meeting thing at work. Or we justify why we should have been scared. Or we do all sorts of different things because we're afraid of admitting to ourselves that we were wrong about ourselves. We were wrong about a situation. This really is an untraining. We're untraining ourselves. Because it actually takes a lot of energy to stay scared. It's exhausting. Or anxious or angry or depressed, or it's like this interesting way these mechanisms require tons and tons of energy. Resting at peace requires very little energy. We don't really have to do anything. That's the state we'll go back to. Nobody likes the ego grind. It's not enjoyable. And for so many people in this culture looking for the quick and easy path, this is what will continue to divert them from getting anywhere in the spiritual path. And it's such a problem. Because sometimes people get it part way. Like if you're part way in healing a seriously upsetting experience or trauma or a severe trauma, and you go part way and you get to that point of the grind and then you pull back, you've just upset yourself again, but you haven't gotten anywhere. And this is really common in what I call incomplete healing, that we don't go all the way through it, that we kind of nibble at it, get close to the thing, and then you pull back. And so this is how a lot of people, as I said, feel like they're going in circles. They don't feel like they're going anywhere. So we have to develop this resilience. And for the more severe traumas and stuff like that, get a support network. It's important to build up that support to help you be through certain cycles that are just part of how these human bodies want to purge themselves. So you don't have to do it on your own. And some things with the ego grind you are going to have to do on your own. As I said, the more severe an upset, a trauma is, the more it is important to have social support. But as you go further, and many of you know this, like, more people don't understand when you're grinding on this, let's say, issue of being attractive. Right? Because so much of the rest of the culture is to say, yeah, you should worry about being attractive, and you should be doing this and doing that with your hair and doing this with your teeth and working out this much and blah, 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 blah. Right? So when you get into that grind, you're going to find that there's less understanding in a lot of culture around what's going on. So it is going to be a lot of just you. And even in the sense that when we're on our own, the grind can come at any time where some part starts to worry about some particular thing or be angry or, whatever the upset is, be desirous. But still, it's a simple recommendation. Come back to awareness. Endure. Take it. Just be with that sense of something that keeps wanting you to participate in the grind or participate to get rid of the grind. Give it back to the energy as the fan starts to wind down. It starts to squeal and smoke and squeak. And you're just like, oh my God, I should just plug it back in so it spins faster again and that squeakiness goes away. Instead, we want to let it get all the squeaks out, all the smoke and all the grinding until it finally stops and drops. At which point, if you haven't had this experience before, you're affirmed in the spiritual path. Who's like, wow, it is so great that anytime somebody now talks about a quarterly meeting or a company meeting, I don't feel scared anymore. I just go to the meeting, right? That's the freedom of letting go of an issue like the one I mentioned before. I hope these words help you understand the ego grind a little bit more. And feel free to ask questions if you have any of them. And feel free to check out my blog if you haven't found that yet at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. Bye, everyone.